Welcome to the Retire with Peace podcast, the podcast where we help you create a fulfilling and stress-free retirement. Each week, we bring you expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you plan and live your best retirement life. Whether you're nearing retirement or already enjoying your golden years, this podcast is here to support you every step of the way. Let's embark on this journey together and discover how to retire with peace.
Welcome back to the Retire with Peace podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dave Zaegel. And in order to retire with peace, we like to help people get healthy. Now, there's only so much we can do for that as financial advisors, but we like to encourage it. We like to make sure that we ask about people's health. Therefore, we're going to actually do a series of episodes. I don't know how many. I like to keep these episodes short, so I don't know how many they will actually be by the time we get done putting all this together. But I want to do a series of episodes on getting healthy and teach what I have learned over many years about being healthy and about getting healthy to help you retire with peace. The reason for that is I often like to say that you can have all the money in the world, but if you're not healthy, there's only so much you can enjoy that money. So let's focus on health as well as wealth. And not even as well as part of being wealthy, we need to also be as healthy as we can be. So I'm bringing to you a lot of the knowledge that I've accumulated over the years from many different sources and things that I've put into practice personally, which I don't always do. Got to admit that. I have a family with young kids who are in all the activities. I've been building a business. So I get it when people say that they're too busy, they don't have time. I hear you. I get all that. I've failed as well along the way, but I've gotten to the point where being healthy is no longer an option. You have to make time for exercising and eating right. These are just, they're not extras in life. They are requirements of being healthy physically, but also mentally and emotionally. We need to be eating properly, sleeping, exercising. We'll go through all of that, and we'll talk about how I have gotten healthy over the past, it's been about 10 months, but I've really been focused even more on it. I've always been one to exercise and eat pretty well, but again, life happens, and I put on pounds like anybody else. So talk a little bit about what I've learned, how I've implemented it, and what I recommend you to do from all those recommendations that I've learned along the way. And I'll specifically talk along the way about how in the past 10 months or so, I went from 28% body fat down to just under 20%, which has been really nice to do. But I was able to do it in a very healthy manner. So nothing crazy. No, I wasn't sitting there eating lettuce all day long, and I wasn't taking steroids or anything wild. It was a very healthy progression down, but it was using all those things that I learned. So that's what I want to bring to you in this series of episodes on being healthy. So that way you can retire healthy and then really enjoy retirement as much as possible. So first thing we're going to talk about today is eating your protein. Now, this is a really interesting topic because when we all learned about the food triangle, I remember growing up learning about the food triangle when that came out. You're taught to eat a lot of grains, and then you kind of move up and you get vegetables and then meat, and then I think sugar was on top. But that thing is just totally messed up. We need to toss that way out to the side and just completely disregard it. Because our focus when we are eating needs to be first and foremost on our protein intake. What happens after that is all secondary. And not that the other stuff isn't important, but if you are eating relatively healthy and getting enough protein, everything else takes care of itself. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that I had lost quite a bit of weight and body fat over the past 10 months and put on a lot of muscle. That's all been very helpful. The way I did it is actually not rocket science, and it's what I recommend that a lot of people do, which is two things. One, eat enough protein, and two, keep your total calories under a reasonable amount. And I used a Lose It app for this. You can, I think there's a MyFitnessPal. There's lots of apps where you can actually track whatever you're eating. So if you stay under a certain calorie count, and an app will tell you what that is if you put in your information, your age, how much you're exercising, things like that. If you can stay within a reasonable calorie range and also eat enough protein, then what's left over after you eat the protein will just fit nicely, whether it's fat or carbs. And I wouldn't get too stressed over the division there. It's nice to kind of have it a little bit equal and not have too many carbs. But on a day-to-day basis, if you're eating enough protein and you're staying under a calorie amount, you're probably going to be just fine. Don't overthink it too much. Now, why do we need protein, especially as we get older? Well, the amount of protein that we ingest doesn't get absorbed as well as it did when we were younger. So when you're younger, you eat some protein, your body just bang, it'll soak it right up, and you're growing, your hormones are cranking, everything's working. So you can eat protein, it'll be absorbed very easily. Now, as you get older, that's less and less the case. So therefore, we need to be eating even more protein, or at least as much as we did when we were younger, especially if you were now exercising and trying to build up some strength along the way. So protein is interesting because it's kind of been lumped as one thing. So when we look, for example, at carbohydrates, if you look at a nutrition label, it gets broken down into monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated. We'll talk about simple sugars and fiber, and it'll just kind of break everything all apart for carbohydrates. And you can see a lot of different details. And actually, I just realized I apologize, I just lumped fats and carbohydrates in the same thing there. But the point being, protein you'll see as one line, fats and carbohydrates you'll see broken out into a couple of different subsections. So you'll get, trans fat, polyunsaturated fat, things like that. So excuse my confusion there for mixing carbohydrates and fats, but you get the point where you get a lot of breakout in terms of carbohydrates and fats. But when you get to the protein line, it is protein, and that's it. But all protein is not created equal. If you're going to have chicken, it's going to be different than any type of fish. Not completely different, but somewhat different than fish, which will be different than a steak. And all of those are just fine. There's not a good or bad protein. Some are going to be better than others. But when we're talking about focusing on diet and eating enough protein, first and foremost, just focus on the volume of protein that you are getting. Then secondarily, we can focus a little bit more on where that protein is coming from. So how much protein do we need? Well, the easy way to calculate this is to eat a gram of protein per your ideal body weight. So for example, I was eating 200 grams of protein, and most days still do eat about 200 grams of protein. If you get a little bit less and you wind up, if I were to get 170 to 180 grams, that's still fine. This is not intended to be perfect and everything must be exact. But even still, 170 grams of protein, that's still a lot. And I think if you try to do that, and you should try to do that, if that's your ideal body weight, then you'll find, man, I'm eating a lot of protein. But the nice thing is protein's going to fill you up so you're not as hungry throughout the day. And it's going to be fueling your body. And I never like to say it's impossible, but it really is almost impossible to gain weight from eating too much protein. Not going to happen, all right? You're going to gain weight because you ate too many other calories, but you're not going to gain weight because you had too much protein. It's just not going to happen. So target at least 1 gram of protein that equals your ideal body weight. So if your ideal body weight's 130 pounds, do 130 grams of protein. If it's 200 pounds, do 200 grams of protein. So that's an easy way to figure out how much protein should I be eating. Then you can back into how much do I need at each meal. For example, if you're targeting 150, let's use a round number, 150 grams of protein, you should probably have 5 different times throughout the day where you're eating 30 grams of protein. Or you can divide it up differently. You can have, 4 different times where you're eating 35 to 40 grams, and you're going to get pretty close. But if you actually measure out what that is in terms of eating, chicken or steak or fish, it winds up being quite a bit, which is a good thing because you are fueling your body with that protein. You're fueling your muscles with what they need in order to grow. And we're going to talk about exercise in a different episode. But the focus of this one is just first and foremost, if you do nothing else, and the reason I start with this is because let's say you can't do anything else. Let's say you have an injury that's preventing you from exercising at all. Well, no matter what, you can still eat your protein. Even if you can't move, you broke your leg and you can't even walk around, you can still focus on your diet and eating your protein. If you do this day after day after day, you're going to feel tremendous. And in fact, one of the interesting things that I've noticed since I really started focusing on this about 10 months ago, I had one time where I got sick. I must have had like a stomach bug or eaten something. So I got sick for one day. And it was pretty bad, obviously, with the stomach bug. But I got sick for one day. Other than that, I have not been sick at all. Not even going to knock on wood because I'm just going to keep this going. But really, I have not been sick. And I got 3 kids. So, they're bringing home all the stuff from school. But as soon as I feel anything, I really make sure to go back and focus on eating my protein and doing all the other things that we're going to talk about in future episodes. And I have not been sick one time. And it's been fantastic. So everything we're going to be talking about is really going to help you stay healthy overall. There's no silver bullet in this. There's no, oh my gosh, do this and you'll never have any issues or you'll never get cancer. There's nothing like that out there. There is no silver bullet. But if you do the things that we're going to talk about in these episodes, you're going to feel fantastic. You're going to be much healthier. You're going to move around better. You're going to feel better. And step number 1 is focus on your protein intake. We also need to keep the calories under a decent level as well. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you're eating enough protein, like we talked about, 1 gram per ideal body weight, and you're keeping the rest of your calories in good order, you're going to be in fantastic shape. And that's exactly where we want to start. Focus on what's going into your body, eat your protein, and then later on in future episodes, we'll talk a little bit more about exercise and other things. But for now, day 1, focus on the protein, make sure you're getting plenty of that, and then we can go from there.